The Jets are hoping to be a Super Bowl contender in 2024. Well, on Monday night, they ran into a bona fide Super Bowl contender in the San Francisco 49ers. 32-19 opening game loss for the Jets. Welcome into our first 4 Downs edition of Flight Plan. This is the way we're going to recap games here this season. Going to shorten things up a little bit, not going on and on, just 20 minutes, 20-ish minutes. We're going to talk about the 4 big themes of the game. 5 minutes apiece. Get in, get out, let you get on with your day. We'll get Zach's insight from being in the locker room after the game as well. Zach, we were supposed to stream this live. That's not happening. We will get there. We're working out the kinks, but hopefully we'll have this up. And it, you know what? We were going to compete with the presidential debate.
This is for America.
Now, yes, we're doing this for our country. Watch the debate. Get over to YouTube afterwards, and we're here for you. So you excited about doing it this way, Zach, instead of on fumes having to go 45 minutes to an hour?
Yeah, I mean, I there's obviously always a lot to talk about, but yeah, there's already so many great pods on this feed that are breaking down the games quicker than us. Connor and Joe and Will, they all do pods like right away. So, and they do a great job with it. And I'm obviously in the press box in the locker room working. Last night, I didn't get back to my hotel in San Francisco until, I think, 1 in the morning San Francisco time, which is 4 a.m. here. So, it's hard for me. I used to do – I won't get – I'm already dragging on. But I used to do a post-game pod when I covered the Eagles, and it was fun. But when you have to cover the game and then also do a post-game pod, that was always a challenge. So we have those guys doing those post-game pods, then we come back the next day after we've had a minute to breathe, after solid talks the morning after. And, so I'm looking forward to this new format we're doing.
Yeah, and generally it won't be 9 o'clock at night after the game. It'll be the next day, especially if it's a home game. We'll be able to record early. Even if it's a road game, it's usually not San Francisco, and you'll be getting back, and we'll be able to do these quicker after the game. But Monday Night Football is what Monday Night Football is. All right, let's get on with it.
First down.
There's the great sound effect. Get used to those. All right, first down, Aaron Rodgers played. He played more than 4 downs. He looked great at times. Overall, the numbers, okay. 13 of 21, 167 yards, a touchdown, an interception. It wasn't a good interception, but a great touchdown pass on catching the defense, free play, finds his old guy, Alan Lazard. Lazard actually had a couple of plays in this one, but break down Aaron Rodgers for us.
Yeah, it was interesting because I think we all were kind of eagerly just like trying to see what it would look like in the beginning. It was like a very surreal feeling that we finally were getting to see him as a Jet, like actually. And, I think everybody, whether they wanted to admit it or not, was like, all right, what's going to happen on the 4th play and then the 5th play? And the 4th play, he throws it to Breece Hall, he fumbles it away. So it was very like...
It was only slightly better than a year ago.
It was anticlimactic. The first drive, 3 and out. 3rd play, drop by Alan Lazard, which would have been a first down. So it was a very Jetsian start to the game, like Jetsian of the last few years. Then they came back out. It was very clear pretty quickly that the Niners were going to kind of punch them in the mouth, and the Jets maybe weren't ready for it. But the Jets had a great drive late in the first quarter where they go 70 yards down the field. He hits Garrett Wilson 4 times in that drive, including a very good one on the first target. They score on a Breece Hall touchdown at the end of it. And in the press box in that moment, I'm thinking, man, this is going to be – are they about to go off? Like it just felt like they were just moving in a way that the Jets usually don't in the first quarters of games. Like, especially with Hackett last year, but even with LaFleur the year before, they were not good in the first quarter. And they had, I think, 3 first downs on that drive alone, and there was a stat that they, I think, never had more than 2 first downs in the first quarter, or third down conversions in the first quarter, like all of last year and maybe the year before that too. So in that moment, it was like, okay, so this is what they can be. And then they kind of weren't that the rest of the game. But Rodgers was fine. He was pretty good. Like I know the numbers don't reflect it necessarily. They didn't really have the ball very much. I know that's an excuse. But the defense really was on the field for a long time. Like they did not do a good. That was the Niners' strategy. They were just running the clock out basically, and it worked because the Jets' D-line was not ready to go, which we're going to get into. But so the offense didn't really have a chance to get going. Garrett Wilson only had 1 more catch the rest of the game. Aaron Rodgers only completed to 3 receivers, which I saw a stat. I think Rich Cimini had it. Credit to him. He's great at this stuff. Literally the first time in Aaron Rodgers' career, he's only thrown it to 3 guys. Or completed passes to 3 guys. That is absolutely bonkers. For a guy that's in his 20th year he's obviously great at spreading the ball around. It just says that something was off, and we're going to get into parts of the issues I had with the offense. But I didn't come out of that game being worried about the offense or about Aaron Rodgers or the offensive line really either. Whereas I think every game in the 2 years I've covered the Jets before this, we came out of it probably at least wondering what was going to happen at those spots. Whereas now we're like, okay, those are fine, but the defense.
Yeah.
So it was a surreal game for sure.
Yeah, it absolutely was. What a typical opener here for the Jets. All right, up next. Second down, we're going to stick with the offense. Play calling, Hackett, run, pass. That was back, a lot of that. And also something you just mentioned, which was time of possession. 21-20, lowest time of possession in Aaron Rodgers' career. They just couldn't get on the field, and they couldn't get the Niners off the field.
Yeah, it was, Hackett's game plan again, Rodgers obviously is the one running the show on offense, clearly, but Hackett still, I think everybody kind of just out of sight, out of mind with Nate Hackett, but Aaron Rodgers isn't he's not designing every play, he's not setting it all up in practice, he's not, he's not picking every single part of the scripted plays. Nathaniel Hackett's still the offensive coordinator, and he has a role as the offensive coordinator. And so you saw a lot of the same tendencies they had last year. And I'm sure there's part of it where Rodgers in his first game back was a little hesitant to do some things. He wasn't perfect. In the last down, I didn't mention, a couple of the bad throws he had, but an interception and there was an incompletion on 4th down to Garrett late in the game. But yeah, I didn't find the game plan to be very good. Our head honcho, Joe Cap, do people call him that? I probably should check before calling that.
Now they do.
Joe, he posted a screenshot of a formation they had where they had Tyler Conklin and Allen Lazard lined up in the backfield. It was so obvious they were going to run the ball. It's just telegraphing stuff all the time is the biggest issue I have. It's just so very bland, basic route concepts and all that. And so the biggest concern I think I've had about this offense beyond, wondering if the offensive line would stay healthy, Mike Williams, all that stuff, has been Nathaniel Hackett and his ability to lead this offense. And so I didn't come out of that game feeling any better about Hackett, but, Rodgers has, with the throws he made, he has the ability to overcome the blandness, if that's what it's going to be. The free play, Aaron Rodgers is good on free plays as anybody in NFL history. I think he has 18 touchdown passes on free plays. I think the second best is 6. And so Rodgers is going to make things happen in a way that Zach Wilson isn't going to go outside of the system to figure something out or call the plays himself to the line. Mike White, Joe Flacco, I'm blanking on the other. Trevor Siemian, Tim Boyle. All these guys are not going to do what Aaron Rodgers can do at the line of scrimmage. I didn't mention him because he can do it. He can do anything. He puts his mind to. But yeah, so I have concerns about Hackett still. The next couple weeks, the matchups get a little easier, so this is a chance for him to kind of air it out and maybe get a little more creative, so we'll see what he does.
Yeah, and let's stop between second down and third down, because what I said off the top was this was a bona fide Super Bowl team that they ran into, and the Jets want to get there, but we could look back on this game and think, you know what, that was the perfect way to open the season because it let this team know that there was a long way to go. So we'll see 100%. How it plays out, and we're going to see how it plays out quickly because, like you said, the next 3 games are very much winnable, and we're going to see what happens.
Third down.
All right, third down, we're going to switch things over to the defense because this was not the Jets' defense we are used to seeing. They got run all over, and obviously it wasn't Christian McCaffrey. Jordan Mason, 28 carries, 147 yards, just gashing them and gashing them up the middle. And beyond that part of it, and that led to the time of possession, obviously, but no pass rush, Zach.
No pass rush, and they were worse in the running game than the passing game, but they were bad in both. I have a story coming out tomorrow about how bad the defensive line was, and the Hassan Reddick of it all because he wouldn't have helped in the run game necessarily. But you have another defensive end there. You have a better rotation of guys. This rotation they had of guys, like none of these guys are effective. Michael Clemens, I think he made some plays, but like generally he's just not like a starting caliber defensive end. Will McDonald was invisible. Jermaine Johnson had a bad game. Quinn and Williams, I was fascinated that they kept putting him at defensive end, which I had never really seen them do to that degree. It was effective in the beginning, and it kind of faded a little bit. I think they play teams with worse offensive lines, it'll do better. Trent Williams didn't practice all of training camp, and he shows up and he doesn't give up a single pressure in however many pass blocking snaps he had. I looked at the PFF rankings. Out of 132 edge rushers graded, 132. Will McDonald was 130th. Jermaine Johnson was 127th. Michael Clemens was 114th. Tack McKinley was 109, and Braden McGregor was 102. They were not getting.
Dare I ask where Huff was?
I actually didn't look. Yeah, he didn't really stand out in that Eagles game.
No, he didn't. He didn't.
I think he'll be fine. It was the turf was really bad there, and his whole thing is his get off. So I imagine that was an issue for him. But yeah, I think more than the Reddick thing, honestly. I mean, not more than it, because Reddick for the pass rush they needed him, but I walked out of that game thinking they missed John Franklin Myers so much. He did the dirty work. He was a really good run defender. Over the last 3 years, he ranked as one of the best run stoppers among edge rushers in the league. And he's just a solid guy that, you could shuffle inside, and they don't really have the versatility with him gone. And all of a sudden, the defensive line, this used to be the deepest, most talented group they had. And there's stretches where you have, Jalen Holmes, Braden McGregor, Javon Kinlaw, and Jermaine Johnson as, your four defensive linemen. That's just not – it doesn't ring the same bell. And Javon Kinlaw, by the way, had a pretty bad game against his old team. And he got a lot of hype this offseason. He looked pretty good in camp. And you hope that it wasn't just a training camp star because he's huge and he's going to be great in training camp, because he was not good. Quinn Williams is the only one I can point to and be I thought he was pretty good. But other than that, they were just not getting to Brock Purdy, and they were not getting to Jordan Mason. They were not tackling him. As a defense, they had 18 missed tackles, and I think the defensive line had about half of them. It was just a very disappointing defensive line effort, and you wonder all of a sudden if they have the talent to be what they want to be without Hassan Reddick in there. When you have Reddick in there, all of a sudden you have him starting, being the pass rusher. Clemens is fine as a backup. Will McDonald doesn't have to play as much as he did, because it seems like maybe he's not ready to go against these great linemen. I think next week it should be a get-right game for that D-line, because that Titans offensive line is not very good. I think they had a really, really rough game. That J.C. Latham and Peter Skoronski, their last two first-round picks, really, really struggled. I think they both gave up 6 pressures and multiple QB hits and a sack. And so the next 2 weeks we're going to really find out if this Jets D-line is bad, or if it can be good against bad teams at the very least.
What does this do for the Reddick situation? Everybody, immediately jumps to, well, now he's got more leverage than he already had. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it's, if nothing else, there's more pressure on Joe Douglas today than there was on Sunday. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, and everybody's talking about it too, so it's out there. I think it is a little bit of an overreaction, but it is true. They traded for him to replace Bryce Huff and JFM. Sorry, I got a little cough. Great podcasting.
Those cross-country flights.
Yeah. I am coming back from a cold. But yeah, the plan was for Reddick to take up the bulk of the snaps, and instead Reddick's not there, so they don't have the guy who's supposed to take up 70% of those snaps or whatever it is. And so you're stuck with Michael Clemens and Will McDonald, who are probably backups at this stage. Maybe McDonald becomes more later on. And so yeah, it's going to magnify it, but I don't think it's, I mean, the Jets are kind of sticking with their stance as far as I know. I haven't heard anything about things changing. Hassan Reddick is pretty, he has his principles that he believes in. He thinks the Jets screwed him, and I don't think he intends on coming anytime soon. And if the Jets are willing to adjust we'll only talk to you if you come to the building, then maybe something can get done, but I still don't see it getting resolved. And I think the Jets, if anything, they're going to be, okay, that was bad. Let's see what happens against a bad offensive line with the Titans. If it's bad again, then even if not Reddick, we have to do something, because that is not going to be a defensive line that can hold up this year.
4th down.
All right, fourth down is always going to be a look inside the locker room and what Zach heard there, and we'll try to include some sound when we can. We're going to start this one out with Garrett Wilson in the locker room after the game.
Was that scoring drive, did that feel like a taste of like what this offense can be when you guys are clicking? The 70-yard scoring drive?
Yeah, I feel like when we're rolling, I know what that can look like. We weren't rolling throughout the game, but we found it in spurts there, and we got to find a way to bottle it up and take it to every drive. Maybe that's what it can look like. I feel like it can look 1,000 ways. A million ways to skin a cat, but it felt good at the time, and we got to get back to that.
He didn't exactly say, "Yeah, that's going to be our offense."
No, he didn't. Garrett, I've said this before. He's like the best post game player maybe I've ever covered because he's just so brutally honest, and he's speaking with his emotions. And he was not satisfied with the way the offense played. Breece Hall was very upset with himself with the way he played, and Breece didn't have his best game. He fumbled the ball away. He's only fumbled it away twice in his NFL career. He had a bad drop, and he said he also had some messed up like stuff in protection. So, I think this group, Aaron Rodgers too, like all three of those guys who are the cornerstones of that offense, they all said the right stuff. Like we did some good things, but we were not good enough. We need to be better if we want to be what we think we can be, and we have the ability to get there. They need to be better. Like Alan Lazard was the main one who came to play, ironically. He deserves a lot of credit because he had a really, really good game after that drop. And, yeah, they left some stuff out there. Like we talked about earlier, this game was not necessarily on the offense, but I do think they did leave some stuff out there. And it's stuff that'll get fixed. And to your point earlier, I think going against the 49ers in week 1 it could be a godsend if they respond to it the right way, because they fancy themselves Super Bowl contenders. You just saw what a Super Bowl contender looks like, and they whooped your ass, as Garrett Wilson said. And so how they respond to this, we're going to find out if this team has the ability to go where they want to go, because they were not ready for that. They're going to play some teams that are not Super Bowl contenders, and then eventually they'll get into some teams that are closer to that. But, yeah, Breece and Garrett, I really respect their humility in moments like this, because not all guys like that are willing to say, like, yeah, we need to be better. We were not good enough.
The Sauce situation was weird in the game, right? Like, especially watching the broadcast, because he goes out of the game, he's on the sideline, and then they actually find a play where he makes a tackle in the backfield, and he kind of gets up, and he's rubbing his shoulder and basically saying, like, oh, this must be where he got hurt. But then we find out that it wasn't an injury at all. And he's out for a little bit, but then he's back in before the end of the first half. He plays the second half. It's just strange.
It was very bizarre in the moment, especially just because nobody knew what was going on. All of a sudden he's off the field, and he briefly talks to some coaches, and then he's just standing there on the sideline with his helmet off, watching the game, and he looks very upset with himself. I don't know if it's with himself or whatever. Like, he just seemed very upset. We're watching him. He sits on the bench alone. The half is winding down. I think he was out for 9 plays, and I think Brock Purdy was like 6 for 6 in those snaps. And Sauce, to his credit, like everybody's focusing on that part, he was on the field for I forget how many snaps, and he was targeted once and didn't allow a catch. Like, he dominated again. But it was weird. And then the explanation after the game from Robert Saleh and him was that he had the wind knocked out of him, or he needed to catch his breath, which you don't love to see that in week 1. So I don't know if it's a conditioning issue or if he got hit somewhere. That I know some people were pointing out a clip where he got hit in the shoulder or something like that. I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but it was weird.
But if that was the case, right? If it was the shoulder, wouldn't they just say that, right?
Well, they would have to, I think, if it was. Yeah. But and part of it was that the Jets told Lisa Salters all they would tell her is that it's not injury related, and there was no specifics, and so everybody started speculating. And that becomes an issue. Like that, it was just poorly handled ultimately. But it was
shocking.
Yeah, it was a weird situation.
Yeah.
We'll see if there's anything that lingers from that. But I was confused by it for sure. I think everybody was.
You made the great point. He played a great game, even though this defense didn't.
Not in the run game, I should say. He did miss some tackles, but he was great in pass coverage. Yeah.
8 straight scoring drives for
Yeah.
this Niners fan. So really, like, collectively, nobody can really say they played great on that side of the ball. Anything else from the locker room after the game that stood out?
It wasn't a very eventful locker room. A lot of times in environments like that, guys are trying to get out of there. But, we talked to them. We talked Quinnen Williams. He talked a little bit about playing defensive end, the goal being to get him away from double teams. He seemed very excited about it. But it's a lot of it's the same message. Like, we know what we need to fix. And, I didn't get a sense of, like, panic or worry. Whereas at this time last year, they won that game, and there might have been worry and panic because they lost their quarterback. Yeah. But I think week 1 is overreaction city. But I just didn't expect to come out of week 1 being worried about the defense. And so that's where my concern is more than anything.
I think back a year ago, and, like, after week 1, I just remember thinking, oh, man, we have to do this podcast all season knowing what we were in for, right? Like, it was just kind of demoralizing knowing, like, this, hoping maybe Zach Wilson will, like, shock us.
Well, I think the Zach Wilson part of it was part of it because it's like, we're about to do it's like the exact same team as last year because they just brought back. It was like Aaron Rodgers' friends and the same roster, basically.
So this definitely feels different because it just feels like, okay, the stuff we were worried about actually looked decent. The stuff we weren't worried about maybe needs to be fixed. But I think there's still this hope. Like, I mean, we predicted every game last week, Zach, and we both predicted they would lose game 1 in San Francisco. They lost game 1 in San Francisco. So it's definitely not panic time. It's time to look ahead to some winnable games here and try to get this thing back on track. But it's certainly doable.
Yeah, it was not the start you wanted for all the hype that this team had, but they got out of it pretty healthy. Michael Carter II, not re-injured, but the same ankle that he had hurt, he had to leave the game. Saleh says he could have come back in, and the more concerning thing is that Saleh said it's going to be a lingering thing the entire season, which you don't love to hear. But yeah, I don't think you come out of that panicking too much. I still think at the end of the day, if anything, the biggest question mark on this team is coaching. Because I think Saleh and Nathaniel Hackett have left a lot to be desired so far in their Jets tenure. So, it didn't feel like that defense was ready to go, frankly, for all the preparation and all that you've had. So that part's concerning. But at the end of the day, I do believe this team has the talent to be very good. And so if they stay healthy and if they can get that defensive line to figure things out, like everything starts with the defensive line. Sauce Gardner can dominate on the back end. It does not matter if they're not getting off blocks. So it's just that's going to be the storyline all week. And if they do not dominate that, they need to dominate that Titans offensive line because it is not a good offensive line. So, and there's a rookie left tackle. I don't know if Latham plays left or right. I got to double check that. I feel like he's probably the left tackle, but I shouldn't make assumptions. But yeah, they need to come out and show not only that they don't need Hassan Reddick, like silence all that noise, but come out and prove that you guys are good still on the defensive line because you have a lot of people doubting you all of a sudden.
All right, one last note. Scoregami, 1,085th in NFL history, 1,085th unique score.
Crazy.
And so congratulations to everybody involved on that. You said you think it's the first scoregami you've ever covered.
Probably. It still blows my mind that that's like there's been so many games and there's still scores that haven't happened. Like, it's crazy.
Well, and I was scrolling through the Twitter account, the Scoregami Twitter account, and it's crazy how, like, you would think every score, and they would be like, this score has happened like 700 times. Yeah. But it's legitimately a lot of scores when it's like, this is the 7th time that
it's crazy.
This has been the score. Yeah. There's a lot of combinations out there.
Yeah.
That's why it's hard to win those Super Bowl squares.
Oh, yeah. I won one of those like once in my life. It was a great feeling. But because you're watching it the whole game with the score, you're like, ooh, so close. Get a touchdown here. Yeah. But scoregami, we did it, guys.
All right, that's going to do it. Sorry nobody was with us live. We will work on that, but definitely leave the comments. Let us know what you thought of this new format, doing the 4 things from the game.
Subscribe.
Getting in, getting out. We actually went longer than the plan was, but we'll
work through it.
We'll get there. All right, and we will talk to everybody later this week. We'll get you ready for the Titans and mop up this game a little bit more later in the week. Bye-bye.